Hello and warm welcome, the audience, to New Generation Women, and I'm Janine van Zenos. Our vulnerability is our strength, our passion is our connection, and our intuition equally valuable to our intellect. We are shaping a future for ourselves in our community that we are proud to stand tall in. Unfortunately, these are not my words, these are the words of my very special guest today. You might, or pearls of wisdom, we call them the pearls of wisdom of my special guest. You might remember a talk show that I had with Karen Lee Downs last year, and she's a really very successful mover and shaker in the business world. And she spoke so beautifully about her daughter that I said, Karen, can you not ask your daughter to join us next time? So here we are. This is the day, literally the day. Rebecca Day, a confident, self-assured, passionate, highly committed activist, millennial, and international business consultant with her mom in London, Karen Lee Downs, a leadership expert. Hello and warm welcome from Munich.
Hey, Janine.
Hello, so good to see you. So good to see a team, a leadership team in one camera. I didn't have that, so that's my first time, which is great. And when I heard your name, Rebecca, I thought, Rebecca Day, that's a perfume. That's a name, that's a brand. Did you ever think of making a brand or a perfume out of it? Rebecca, I was almost like a melody in my head when I heard your name, Rebecca Day. Did you ever think about it?
I haven't yet, but I'm open to anything.
Did you think about the melody of the name, Karen, when you came up with her name?
I don't think I thought about the melody. I think I was very much aware of it had been a name that I think I'd held dear. Nothing in particular that was melodic, no.
I find it extremely, because I have already a connection to Rebecca, but I love the name. It just really resonates in my heart like an instrument. So if you ever want to make a perfume, that's your name.
I'll name it after myself and send you the first bottle.
Yes, definitely I will. Listen, about the pearls of wisdom, these are the highly strong feminine principles. And you are also saying the strong, powerful tools for shaping a future world. You're looking to your mother. Has she inspired you to say those words, Rebecca?
Yes, I think in part she can't help but. I mean, growing up with a single mum for most of my life, and her having her own business, that she was always such a strong, independent, incredible role model that I think I can't help but be shaped by that in many ways. So yeah, I would say definitely.
Was this, when you're saying we're going to talk about conscious parenting and parenting in our second part, but were you sometimes also intimidated by the success of your mom, that you thought like, I have to be as good as that?
Yeah, actually. I would say that it wasn't so much anything that was put on me from mum, but I would say I had her on a pedestal for a long time. So they felt like, you know, she was out changing the world, she had her own business, and that's what women did. So I think I did have high expectations of myself, and I measured myself and I compared at times, often more in an aspirational context. So that it was something to live up to. And I think I, at times, went down a bit of a rabbit hole or a bit of a tunnel, thinking that I wasn't good enough because I didn't compare. So there's definitely been aspects of that, and I think in ways we still come up against some of it today in different expressions. And it felt like in some ways big shoes, but at the same time, I think she always so empowered me to actually find my own voice and my own place, and supported me in that it was a beautiful balance. But I remember at one time when I was growing up, being at one of Mum's workshops, and someone came up afterwards and said, oh my gosh, I feel like I've just met the Beatles. You know, the weirdest thing to hear when you're 10 years old, right? And so there was an element of this image, I think, that I grew up with. And if I didn't have the support and empowerment in my own voice, then that would have been really challenging. And it's definitely something that I've come up against, because I think I've dealt with trying to be the good girl, or trying to be an activist as well. So I think it's been a mixed bag, to be really honest, in many ways. So it's been an incredible support, an incredible role model, and a lot to live up to that I sometimes get to put to the side and sometimes not so much.
Well, let's go into detail. Let's go just break that down because there is so much and there's so much to talk about. But I would like to say a very short, funny, sweet story because you talked about the Beatles.
Yeah.
And we just had a guest here and she's coming very often. She's an amazing dancer. And we are a group of dancers and there are 3 of us and we dance together since 20 years. So she loves us. She's always with us. She's 20 years young and we are a little bit older. And her girlfriends in Vienna said, so how are you dealing with your friends who are so much older in Munich, which is us? And she said, well, it's a little bit like the old ladies from Mamma Mia. And I was like, you are one of those old ladies from Mamma Mia. I was like, that is so strange because you feel so young. And there's a point in time when she says you're one of the old ladies of Mamma Mia. Anyway, Beatles sounds much better, Karen.
Can I just say also, and building on your Mamma Mia story, we went to see it together, right?
Yeah.
Rebecca and I went to see that film together. And when Meryl Streep comes out with the hairbrush and she's singing the song and she's celebrating, because I was a single mother,
Yes.
and celebrating her daughter's marriage with her 2 girlfriends. And Rebecca and I turned to each other and Rebecca looked at me and she said, don't even think about it.
That's true. That's true. That's so funny.
I'm planning it already.
But that's true. And I love Meryl Streep and I love the role, but I had to say, so that fits. I love it. Warren Bennis, Rebecca, is one of the pioneers of leadership studies. And he said, you're not born to be a leader. You were made to be a leader. What made you the female leader you are today?
Wow. It's a really interesting question because, to be really blunt, I wouldn't necessarily think of myself as a leader. It's not always how I relate to myself because I don't always feel that way. I think I do have a very deep belief that anybody can be a leader and is a leader. And I think if I look back through the journey of my career, what I've been through personally, professionally, Mum and I were actually just talking about this today, is that there's been times when I've found it really tough. I went into the corporate world in consulting in my mid-20s, and there was a lot of times when I really didn't feel like a leader. I found it really tough. I was up against, I was in some really big environments, whether it was mining, oil and gas, nuclear, aviation. I've worked in so many different industries that I certainly haven't always felt like a leader. And I think the transformation for me from then to now has actually been finding my own courage at times and being okay with being vulnerable. And I think that's for me been the biggest shift. So from my mid-20s to my mid-30s, it's been a journey of being okay with where I'm at and being okay with being vulnerable at times and finding a way to find my courage in those instances. And I certainly don't always do it. I look back on stuff that I've done recently and go, oh, what were you thinking? But I think having the role models and giving myself the permission to mess up and to not have it right and to get it wrong at times and make it messy. Because I think that's one of the things that I really believe is that no one's got it handled. And I think I've spent so long trying to have it handled, and because I've often been the youngest in the room when I'm at work or different environments. And I think trying to match that is where I really got tripped up. So I think going toe to toe with someone or trying to be very professional or have the answer is actually, for me, the thing that gets in the way more than anything else. So I don't know if I really answered the question.
No, totally. Because I wanted to, I'm juggling in my mind what you all said to bring all the dots together again. And you mentioned, of course, vulnerability. Vulnerability is popular since the Power of Vulnerability of Dr. Brené Brown. We all love her because of her honesty and talking about unpopular topics like shame and vulnerability. And then you just said, sometimes I'm messing it up. I'm crazy. I'm a messy messenger, in quotes, summarizing it. That was in our generation, Karen, just not, popular. We would just be professional. And I remember that when I was starting to have a career in the broadcasting industry, I was a very young woman and I just barely, 23, 22. And I went to a very well-known public broadcasting company here. And one of the coaches said to me, I want that you guys are Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I remember, because they were so tough for the guys, how they selected the topics of the day. It was just, you had just 1 minute to talk. And I went like this into the meeting room. I had the fists clenched, and I went like this in the meeting room with my mantra, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So of course it has done a lot to my femininity. It has done a lot to being pushy and have a not even more male personality. Karen, when you see your daughter in her honesty, in her vulnerability, in her self-reflection, how do you perceive then how you grew up as a female leader? What has changed?
I think because in the last conversation we had, Janine, I mentioned that I'd had my own business. So at 26, not having any business degree or experience, starting a business as a single mother, and at 26 years old, that was very young to do a startup business when I look back. I didn't know how to build a business, but what I did do is I trusted that what I knew was to take care of people. I was a healer or a practitioner. And so I built my business, I think, when I look back, on what we now call feminine instinct, intuition, and principles. So I didn't have a lot of what Rebecca contends with or has contended with. I didn't actually have a lot of that in my 20s. So by the time I got to Rebecca's age, I had already forged myself as a successful businesswoman. So I think that gave me a platform to walk into a room and say, I know what I'm doing. I built a multi-million-dollar business. But when I look at Rebecca and she doesn't have that, as many don't, when she doesn't have that platform to stand on, I know that what she's had and who she is and what she's put herself into in terms of personal development, traveling the world in, I think we added up something like 48 countries on her own, through Latin America, when I'm just gripping the chair in my teeth and going and praying that she's okay. I think I look at her now and I look so proudly and say, look at who she's become, because she forged herself into a very courageous spirit. So I don't think it's a very different world, and it's a very different construct that she's found her way to find that agency. And as she said, it's got a lot of vulnerability with it. So I still find I go into corporates because I had a very strong father who trained me very strongly in the masculine. Rebecca was raised by predominantly me as a woman. So I think it's a very different construct. She didn't have that, well, I'm feisty, but she didn't have that male aggression coming at her. So I think when I look at her, she's really retained what the feminine, what I hope the feminine is, and keeps being expressed. And I'm so proud of her.
And it feels like an extending arm. I mean, you know, Rebecca, you don't see it, but the way how your mom is looking at you is just filled with so much pride. And I can almost feel it. I think you said it in a Facebook post also, Karen, she's your favorite person in the world. So this is why I was inspired and said, this is so beautiful, because I think there's so much in raising a daughter and so much in how we can do it today consciously. So this was the reason that I invited you. Let's talk a little bit more about Simon. How do you pronounce him? Some people say Simon Sinek, some people say Simon Sinek. What would you say as natives?
Sinek,
I would say cynic as well.
Yeah.
Cynic as well. Okay, good. Yes, my ex-husband said cynic. I said, no, it's cynic, but I felt insecure. Super. His very popular millennial video that got almost 13 million clicks and was one of the talk shows of Tom Bilyeu in Impact Theory. I highly recommend it to you if you haven't seen it. It's so good. It's found on YouTube. He's talking about how hard it is to manage millennials. And he said out of 4 aspects. One is failure of parenting, or, you know, not the best skills of parenting. Second is technology. Third is impatience. And the 4th aspect is environment. And we are going to talk about parenting a little bit later, just talking about you. And also when I listen to people and talk to people, yes, she is a millennial and she is a different millennial. So I had my hardship experiencing millennials in the way, not so much in traditional corporate companies and the big ones, because I think the tradition was still too strong. They could have shaken the world. But more when it comes to the free market, where they put their own businesses up, it has brought a lot of ideas up, and it has but everything was so entitled. Everybody became a talk show host. Everybody became an author, and just do it in a few days and just market it, because, you know, writing a book and being a coach and doing a podcast and doing that is just part of the marketing concept. So I love doing talk shows, as you know. I just could do it all the time. I love to write a book and I love my teaching, but not because I have to market it, because I really love doing it. So when millennials came, everything was just, oh, it's just easy, just quick, just do it. And I felt so confused and insecure. Being in the millennial generation, how did you feel? Because you had a mother who was just doing an amazing way of parenting. You must have felt different at some point in time, or wasn't it so much going to you? Did you realize it?
Great question. I'm not sure if I realized it, because I think it's all I ever knew. So yes. I didn't know the other version, I guess. And if I look at the choices that I've made, I've been incredibly lucky to have the support of my parents and my family, but I haven't always made conventional choices. But then, you know, I went and got an undergrad, and then I didn't know what to do. So I did business because it sounded pretty generic and it seemed like a good idea. And then I did go and have a full-time job in a consulting for 5 years, and then went freelance. And I've been doing that for about 4.5, 5 years now. And even I think sometimes, oh, another freelance consultant. Oh my gosh, I'm one of them. Yes. They're everywhere. But I think there is an actual beauty in the unwillingness to conform to how it should be. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I really think. And we, Mum and I watched the talk again today, actually, just to refresh it, because we hadn't seen it. And I think, as he said, there's something very entrepreneurial and very interesting and inspiring about that energy of my generation of millennials, and not willing to conform to the systems of how it should be. And this idea of entitlement, I think, is something I've obviously heard a lot. And then the flip side of it is I've had conversations with friends my age going, well, hold on a second, we can't even get on the property ladder, and there's this whole other version. And the thing for me with that conversation is that it gets us into a right, wrong, pointing fingers, you're entitled, well, you screwed the world and I've got no other chance. And actually, that's not, for me, the narrative and the conversation that we need to be having, because it's only going to go one way. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was a really interesting talk, and Mum and I were speaking about it afterwards, because there's a lot of topics and themes and he covers so much. But I also think that there's a level of pointing the finger externally and outside that I am, to be honest, not so sure about. Because he talks about how it's important for corporations to look after the millennials, which I think is very true, and I think it's a great conversation to be having. But it does also perpetuate the idea that, oh, well, they had the bad parenting and now they've got the bad environments and now they've got the bad jobs. And at some point, I do think we need to start to be asking, what can I do about it? And what can we do about it? So while the corporations and the leadership may not be supporting the millennials, and I think they're big topics about depression and social media, it's something that I'm really conscious of, and I know friends are as well. People are becoming more aware of it and starting to put their devices away. But rather than just trying to have a perfect life on Facebook and saying that the boss is a nightmare and, you know, my job's too tough and I want to leave, I am curious about where the level of self-accountability and responsibility comes into it as well. So I don't think that it's blame culture in any way, because I think the more that we perpetuate that narrative, the more it sends us down the path of more of what we've already got. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually personally really interested in having the conversation of going, well, hold on a second, what's that like? And actually standing in the other person's shoes for a moment and bringing some compassion to the table, whether you're talking about your 60-year-old boss who just doesn't get you and he's very domineering and whatever other it might be, or him saying about the entitled millennials, while we judge and assess that perspective, we actually just end up doing that the whole time. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not standing proud or tall in that. I really had to work myself back into my own power, because suddenly everybody was a podcast queen, a podcast king. Suddenly everybody did talk show. And I thought, wait a minute, I really do them because I love them, because everybody, you know, everybody said, oh, Janine, just interview the big ones and get the views and the likes. And I got so angry about that, because I felt so, this is how you have to do it. And then of course it's successful when you go on the free market. But I really felt
so who wants to really say something? Who wants to really write a book? Who wants to really be a coach? Not just because it's so great, and who wants to really be interviewed? I do also, I see it as a journalist when I put my channel together, that have different people together. And of course you do marketing reasons also, but not just I have the eye on that all the time. So I felt like a dinosaur. I felt I'm not, this is it. This was my business. You know, this was my book. This was my coaching business. And definitely this was about it. It's a talk show. I'm too old. That's done. And then young people in their millennial age came to me and said, you know, just interview him because he has a million clicks. So, you know, then you get a million clicks too. And I was so insecure when I went on the free market that I completely had lost myself. I throw all my papers in the corner. I said, I'm not going to do this. So it took 2 years or 3 years for people to say to me, come go back. And I said, no, I'm never touching that. I don't want to do that. So when I started, I felt all that shame rush going and all that, you know, and I really had to work that. And now shame is still there, but it's like in the back of my car, and it's not, you know, it's just getting really boring after a while. But I also had to reflect and not judge it, but reflect when she's a wonderful, highly talented woman, and she had translated the Enneagram. The Enneagram is an old personality typing system that is really old, with 2,500 years. And she translated it, and then she didn't ask, which of course would have been fine, but she said, on the fly on a WhatsApp message, Janine, I just did an article on Enneagram. It's a lifestyle magazine. I named you, isn't that great? I got so furious. I took my WhatsApp, you know, that I didn't scream in it. And I was really determined. She didn't know me that way. And I said, look, this is not how it goes. This is why it was hidden for such a long, that you don't take it. You have no clue about it. You just did the translation. You don't even care about it. You just did a lifestyle magazine. And now even my name is under that. And she said, in a WhatsApp, so it was back and forth. And she said, well, now I feel guilty. I said, no, don't feel guilty and bad. Just reflect on it. The next time, just think about it. Because when I was a journalist, we had a generation and executives who were strict with us. And sometimes it was good. Sometimes it was good to have us reflect on proper resources and do it again and really think twice. And this is why I have my topic with the next generation. How, maybe that's just my thing, and I'm anyway working on it. So getting my self-worth back and my insecurity and looking for how can we complement each other. But it came with hurdles and some painful learnings. Was it the same with you, Karen? Or am I here the only one?
No. You're not the only one, Janine. I think one of the things that I've come to see more recently is a lot of my colleagues, and whether they're in activism or they're social entrepreneurs or corporate leaders, a lot of those leaders are now saying, well, we have to listen to the millennials, and it's up to the younger ones to give us the answers. And I've been having conversations with some of Rebecca's friends and my own colleagues. Two millennials work for me in my team, aside from Rebecca works with me, and the other 2 women work for me. So the conversation they're having and we are having is, it feels like an amazing amount of pressure to be told that. It's up to you, you know. So one version is that as Rebecca said, is the finger can get pointed at me or you and say, well, your generation, the baby movements, me, screwed it up, and now look what you've left us. So there's one aspect of that blame, which Rebecca was really addressing.
Yes.
And I've never heard that out of Rebecca's mouth ever to me, that I screwed it up and that now she has to sort it out. But I do feel there's a lot of pressure. And I said to a colleague, who's older than me again recently, and I said, please stop saying that it's up to the young ones. Firstly, it eliminates me, that I've got a contribution to make. 2, you're actually making it binary. Now we can't work together because generations are so widely dispersed and there's such a big gap between us. So one of the things that I love about working with Rebecca, because we're working on a very big project at the moment, and one of the things that we have to sort out is the differing visions or versions of any situation that we have. And we have to do a lot of work on that, because as you can imagine, I own the consulting business. Rebecca comes in as a contractor with me, with her experience. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for the project, and I have to respect Rebecca's contribution to it. So then she says her contribution and I have to listen, but then her mother, and we have to really watch that we don't get entangled in those roles. And fortunately, we've got an amazing background, but it's really tough. So, you know, people will sometimes say to Rebecca and I, wow, I could never work with my mother. They say that to Rebecca, and my girlfriends will say to me, I could never work with my daughter. And aren't you amazing? Oh, it's not amazing. It actually is really tough.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's amazing because what we get to transform, and we were just talking about this yesterday, because we had, you know, we really came up against each other and both of us were in tears at one point. Said, you know, Rebecca wanted to walk out the door and I wanted to go find another contractor. And we say the ultimate commitment we have to each other, no matter what, we don't walk away. No matter what, we have to bring love back to the table. We have to practice, walk our talk, but really embody our commitment. And that's really tough at times, because often we will come up against, it can't be about the money. If you're not interested and committed to the same things I'm committed to, and this goes both ways, we can't possibly work together. So I think it's such a dance, and I'm learning so much myself about millennials through my own daughter. And I think that's must be the same for you about working with the older generation.
Yeah, because I've been working with people older than me since I started my career. And, you know, often when I was in my 20s, they were considerably older, and, you know, even whether it was working with mum or in other roles that I've had. And I think that's why the point that I was saying earlier, sorry to repeat it, but one of the things that I'm most passionate about is, can we give each other a minute? You know, I feel so strongly that everyone's doing their best, and sure, they're not getting it right. And we're messing up. I'm messing up on a daily basis. Some of the stories I could tell you are cringeworthy. I mean, some like the things I've said or whatever else. But actually, if we can come to the table with some compassion for ourselves and each other, I think we actually get to create a whole new conversation. And that's the work that I'm really interested in doing, is remembering that we're all human. And, you know, excuse the language, but I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and sets out to be an asshole. You know, I'm sorry for the brutal language, but their behaviors might go a certain way, might react in a certain way. We deal with it almost daily at times, and it's tough. But if we actually can remember that I feel like everyone is doing their best, I do think that it starts to change the style of conversation we have. And that's the area that I'm really interested in working in. And that's the area that I want to bring into all organizations that I'm privileged enough to work with. And wow, did we jump in at the deep end deciding to work with mother and daughter.
I think that's another part that I just want to build on, is when we're working together, and Rebecca and I, quite honestly, really questioned whether we would do this interview, Janine.
Yes.
Especially because we look so different and our surnames are different.
Yes.
We don't say that we're mother and daughter, because you can imagine if we go into a very senior leadership group, which we're working in at the moment, and it's a very large group we're working with, and we told them that we were mother and daughter, that filter would be conveyed onto us to their version of what mother and daughter is, not our version.
Yes, I get that. Yes. And I want to, I have it. Yes, sorry, you go ahead, please.
So Rebecca is incredibly disciplined, because I don't call Rebecca daughter, I call her Rebecca.
Yes.
But Rebecca calls me mum.
Yes.
So whenever we go into a working environment, I don't know how she does it, she just flips into Karen this, Karen that, Karen this, Karen that. She never slips.
Good.
It's amazing.
And I call her mum.
Yeah, you do, because I observed it. That's funny, because I think Peter and I, we just make really, we are getting, you know, support for that, and everybody like, wow, because we are ex-husband and ex-wife. And we are now doing a relationship retreat also in Italy. And we have been just having, you know, a wonderful process with a big company for 9 months. And we have been talking about this as we work as ex-husband, ex-wife together. And there is actually really a beauty when we work. And but I'm the shaker and the mover, so it doesn't, you know, it's sometimes really hard. And yes, we are not angels, and yes, marriage stuff comes up, and yes, I have to work on some stuff really a lot. But we both, and it's the same with you, we don't have to say we don't walk away. What we both have the we both still touch each other on a soul level, and we both have the commitment to yield in and to talk with each other. So it doesn't come in, you know, with tea and coffee all the time and chill time. It comes with, this is really hard at times, but it always comes with an amazing reward and amazing connection. And that is a connection. I'm sure that you guys have that too. That is a connection. And I always say to Peter, can we please be instruments and let that soul energy just flow through us, because we do have a connection. We do have a knowledge for each other. We know each other for so long. Let's take that, but we have to work through our issues. We cannot, we have to face that. And he would just love to run away more often. And I always think then, okay, I lost him. Then I think, no, it's done. It's done. I cannot deal with that. That's done. But then and then he comes back and always says, Janine, let's be very gentle with each other. So I get then almost emotional again. So, and then, okay, so let's be, so we always find the way back together. But I think that's just a valuable lesson for two people knowing each other so well, like you guys. And always coming, because you have that soul energy, you have a very strong bond, and using that bond and being an instrument for that and serving that, and always going back and humbly taking away what's in the way. How, and you said it so often, Rebecca, more than we did, and maybe I wonder that maybe, Karen, we as a generation have been, you know, more triggered by millennial generation than vice versa, maybe. How do you play with that in a way that it enhances, you know, your generation, your age, your freshness, your different perspective, and then our wisdom and our experience, Karen? How do you take that it can come out at its best in your work?
I would say, I don't know that I have had such an issue with millennials, quite honestly. I'm thinking, I'm really looking. At times it's come up, but not so much. I think my trigger is much more that I've experienced because I've so been focused on the subjugation and marginalisation of women in my activism. When I worked in India and Bangladesh, and I had a company that was focused on women for 13 years, I think I've been much more focused, and my triggers lie much more in when I'm with aggressive, assertive, white, middle-aged leaders who want to dominate the conversation, take the power away from the women that are sitting in the room, take advantage of the women they're working with. And quite honestly, that's been my biggest trigger, is where I see that happen. I find it hard when Rebecca said she wants to bring compassion. That's my trigger. So I don't think mine's been so much with millennials, especially because I've got a daughter that I have to practice with every day. And I've also I really feel like I have not ever, I'm sure I have at some point, but not very often ever told Rebecca what she should be or how she should be. And if I have, Rebecca and I have got very strong boundaries or very clear parameters where Rebecca might ring me for support, and she'll be talking, and I'll go to say something because I'm a coach and I'm you know, because of my profession. Rebecca will say, wait, this is my mum I'm speaking to. Could you be mum?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I just listen, and she just rambles and downloads, and I go, okay. And then all of a sudden, it usually happens like this. She'll stop talking, and it's almost like she catches herself. And then she says, okay, I can take it now. What do you think? What do you think about this? And then I might help us sort something out. So I have to really practice, and it's taken a bit for me to really practice not offering support or guidance. And believe me, when Rebecca left home at 18 to travel Vietnam and the world on her own, and me just to zip my mouth when I knew she was getting on the back with her backpack on the back of motorbikes and out in the wilderness, and thinking, oh, just pray that she's got a guardian, all of that around her.
I can so relate to that. No, that's so good. I had a completely different experience, and it's always amazing how we have different experience and different triggers and that, you know. and understanding this is not personal. Everybody has his own experience, and just laugh about it sometimes. I just have a very young man. He's 23, and I was looking for a possible user. Actually, I was thinking in my mind, she has to be 40 plus and spiritual and everything. So he, writes to me on LinkedIn, and I said to him, Sam, you seem to be very sweet, but this is so boring for you, 40 plus women. And he said, no, I like it. I looked at some of your videos. I really like them. I said, oh, really? And I said, well, nice try. But, Sam, maybe just next time. He said, no. And I really like that. So I found him so sweet. So we talked a little bit back and forth. And then he says, in his words, I have already a tender heart for you, Janine. I really have the vision. This feels good for us when we work together. And I like, can I adopt you as my son? So I said, no matter what we are doing, we're just working together. I like you so much. So when he talks to me, he is the boss. When he says, I need to have your topics, I need this, because he's looking into marketing. I said, I want to have it meaningful marketing, meaningful. Don't give me that superficial shit. And he said, no. So I need your stories. So I have to crawl myself up that I'm at least holding my stand, that he's not the boss in the whole situation. So that's my trigger point, that I don't lose myself. And, all the little kids around me, kids in quotes, but I love them so much because there's such a freshness in them. And I immediately get into that very young position. And I think that's my trigger point. But I worked also with the tough ladies who are, I had that because maybe I had to work so that 10 years ago so hard that they don't trigger me so much anymore. I had done my work, but now I have the small ones, and then they become my boss. And that's sometimes I say laughingly, who's the boss in this field? And then they always say, we are. I said, yes, I know, but this is what I see. I have to work on that. So let's go finally to the educational part of how did you, Karen, start to consciously educate your daughter to become that confident, self-assured, committed young leader and woman that she is today? Or how did you set the stage?
I don't think I can take responsibility for all of that package.
But you must take some of that. You must really take some of that, I have to say.
Sure. So I would say way back, when I had, before I had Rebecca, I had already been studying Rudolf Steiner's work, which is called anthroposophy. So that was my spiritual studies. The minute I got connected to that, the breadth and the depth of his understanding of what human beings and the soul forces and spirit, how that all exists in our universe. The thing for me was he was called a spiritual scientist. So I can be very pragmatic as much as I can be very much the healer and interested in the esoteric. To me, Steiner's work brought both of those principles together. And when I looked into his education system, I thought there is no other alternative. So firstly, however controversial it is, back in the 80s, I decided not to inoculate Rebecca because one of Steiner's principles was once an injection of a chemical goes into the blood system, it influences the will. The blood is the sign of our will, the strength of our will. The strength of our immunity system is the equivalent of what our will force is in the world. When our immune system's compromised, so too is our power and our agency in the world. So that connection, those connections that I read about, understood and studied were really important for me. If I had this living being in my system, in my body, that was what her future was. So I did ridiculous things like get goats onto our property so I could milk the goats and give my daughter.
You did?
I did.
That's amazing.
I was wearing Birkenstocks when Birkenstocks were still connected to being a hippie, and I would do all the bizarre things that I was supposed to do as a good Steiner mum. I soaked silk sheets to put them over Rebecca's cradle so that she had the
Sorry, that's amazing. Keep going. That's interesting.
6 months because an electrical vibration would upset her vibration. When she came home from hospital, I would not let my husband have any electrical appliance in the house. And if I was to vacuum or he was to vacuum, Rebecca would be taken out of the house so she had no electrical interference in her system. So I'm telling you, it took something.
It still cracks cracks me up today.
So she had a very good start until one day I realized once I started my business, I can remember walking into the Steiner school, looking at all the Steiner mums and me as this businesswoman thinking, you know what? Nah, I'm putting my red lipstick back on, I'm putting my high heels on, I'm going to pick my daughter up on a moped and off we go on the scooter. So I came to a moment where I thought, I'm now not authentic in this experience. And as Rebecca grew, so that was a very formative part of Rebecca's education was the Steiner School. And I think I got as much out of it as Rebecca did. So no devices, no computers, no television, all of those things that they said, because the teachers knew that when the children came to school and had been watching television, their focus and their attention was absolutely compromised. So I learned a lot about what that was to consciously parent and have to apply those rules at home. It wasn't that she went to school and there was another set of rules at home. So, and then I had an aromatherapy company and it was healing. So I had a lot of things that were really in support of my own alternative way of living. And I think one of the biggest ones was when Rebecca turned 12. And I said to my husband at the time, it's time. And he said, for what? And I said, it's time to take a Rebecca out into the world. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm going to take her to India, because I'd been working in India myself. So I packed Rebecca up and we went for 6 weeks with backpacks, 2 women. And Rebecca and I backpacked around India together. And I said to Rebecca, this is your home, the planet. These is your brethren. These are your sisters. This is who we are as humanity. And if you don't understand that home is not just Australia, home is your planet, and we need to take care of all of it. So I think when I look back, we had the most amazing, ridiculous time and challenging at times, because she's a young girl. And at one point, Rebecca got really sick. I was crying home to Australia saying, oh my God, I'm killing my daughter. What have I done? And she recovered and got stronger from being sick. So we had some amazing adventures, but I think that education of consciously parenting Rebecca into a Waldorf education system gave her, I mean, can you tell the story of how you learned to count?
Not a story.
Please, no, it's not a story. Okay.
It was amazing. All of those beautiful stories that existed in that system. So I think it's, when I look at Rebecca today, and I was sitting with her and her girlfriend at Rebecca's lunch, birthday lunch a couple of weeks ago. And one of the Steiner students that Rebecca grew up with is now living in London, a dear girlfriend of Rebecca's. And she's a corporate lawyer. And Rebecca works in consulting in corporations all over the world. And I thought, whoever said that Steiner and the Waldorf education doesn't produce extraordinary human beings that can do anything and go anywhere? I mean, really, because I was criticized for sending Rebecca to the Steiner school.
I taught at the Steiner school. That was when I was, my ex-husband and I, we left an out-of-the-box life. We left from Germany to America, and I was not illegal there, so I had to work some way off. And I could work at the Steiner school and teach them speaking engagement and things, and rhetoric skills and communication. I was very young at that time, but it was so great to be there. And I really loved, what I could see was that spark and that shining component in the young students. And I would have wished to be at the Steiner school. My stepfather had seen that, but I was already too old. So when it started in our generation, I was 1 year too old. So that was, and I always felt, what a shame, because I'm not an intellectual and I definitely failed in the academic system. So I thought for a long time, I'm just not intelligent, until I thought much later and found much later, you have just a very different way, and you have a very different way to go up. And the students who were very smart at school were not the ones who made it particular in life. And today I'm an advocate that I'm always saying you have to do assessment centers outside of the academic filter. You have to look in different educational systems. And I had always chosen assistants who came from a poor background or a difficult background, who had very low educational backgrounds, because I always wanted to give them the feeling, making it in life is not depending just on your intellectual skills. And I had amazing experiences with women who said you were such an inspiration. I think you always heals a part of you that you have not had. So you look for younger people where you can support that so it can heal also in you. And I think this is the beauty of working with a younger generation and younger women. So you can give something further to them that you didn't have. Rebecca, when Simon Sinek just talking about him again, and he is saying, okay, you know, mistake of parents with millennials have been that they always were special. And if they were not special at school or in their studies, then the parent would make sure that lecturers and teachers would make them special. So the teacher would get so annoyed after a while, so that would give him or her the grades so that he just, you know, could get off the hook. Did you ever feel, did your mom always tell you you're special? Did you have that feeling of everything goes so easy, or seeing that your mom was working hard for her success never gave you that feeling of specialty in the way that everything goes so easy so quickly?
I definitely did get told that I was special and I could do anything. So those parts of the story I can absolutely relate to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the difference for me was that both of my parents, independently obviously of each other because they were divorced, hadn't had privileged upbringings, and they'd both become quite, you know, successful in different ways in their own right. And, you know, from the age of 4, I can remember being, you know, because it was a family business that we started, you know, sitting there going, you know, Mum, my thumb hurts putting the stoppers into the essential oil bottles. Every school holiday was spent working in Mum or Dad's business. As soon as I was legally allowed to work, I went and got a job at McDonald's because I didn't want to be under their umbrella anymore. So I think, you know, one of the other stories we always laugh about is I did my first personal development program when I was 8. And the big theme, it's a great story to tell, right? And the big,
please tell them.
the big theme of that program was responsibility. So I think I grew up with this perspective that yes, I was special and yes, I could do anything, but you've got to make it happen yourself. Mm-hmm. So I think I had, which I'm really grateful for, is that I had both be true in a way. So yes, you can do anything, but you've got to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So I was, you know, so I traveled, and I actually had a little bit of the opposite response where I wanted my own space. So, you know, for my mum to ring the school and talk about my grades, I would have annihilated her. Like that was just the worst thing she could have ever done. Mm-hmm. So I think I had such fierce independence because at the age of 4, it was put your backpack on, honey, and if you can't take it, you can't, if you can't carry it, you can't take it. Mm. Which has helped me well.
Great, Mum. Well done.
Don't worry, I'm sending her the therapy bills. But because, so I think I was incredibly lucky that I had that. And
you have to correct that you're not in therapy.
No, I'm not in therapy. I'm not in therapy right now, but I you know, think it because it's got a lot of value for people who use it. But I think there's been a flip side to it as well. So I can really see that there was such incredible gifts that I was given in that. Mm. And at the same time, something I'm really, and I'm open about this, I'm really working on at the moment is asking for help. Mm. So I had this amazing gift of being fiercely independent, and the hardest thing for me to do is ask for help now. Mm. So I don't know that I necessarily felt like the world owed me. And, you know, I was very much, you know, I can do it on my own. So the idea of Mum ringing one of my university professors to discuss my grades would have just been like the worst thing she could have possibly done. Mm. But I definitely did have that theme running through of you can do anything, but you have to make it happen yourself. So, you know, I'm incredibly grateful for that. And like I think I would say about just about any quality, it has its shadow side. And I think, you know, one of the principles that Mum and I work with is that your greatest strength can become your greatest weakness when it's overplayed. So I think I can be incredibly proud of some of the things that I've done. Mm. The flip side of it, to be really honest, Janine, is I do a lot of stuff on my own. I've traveled the world on my own, and it can be really lonely at times, being so independent. Yes. So incredible gift that I'm grateful for. And now that I'm, you know, in my mid-30s, 35, I'm actually really starting to look at what it's like to ask for help. So
I so get that. I mean, that's exactly what your mom and I'm sure that you also, Karen, has experienced that, you know. I was always the strong one. Even with my ex-husband, when we would be seen, he would have, oh, Peter, the beautiful energy. And then Janine, the strong one. I said, well, something is here wrong. I hated that. I hated that. And we have been talking about this also, Karen, last time. When I was divorced and single for quite some time, it was always, oh, men are afraid of strong and beautiful women. And I felt such a shadow inside and broken that I didn't feel anything, because that strength became so, or people would say, oh, that makes you stronger. I said, I don't want to be stronger. I don't want to be stronger, because I was so lonely in that. And it was so taken for granted. Oh, Janine is doing it anyway. Oh, nobody would just say, wow, Janine, that you managed that. It was just, oh, Janine is strong. She will take care of that anyway. And I got really, really lonely and also sad. And when you say this, I can so relate to this, Rebecca. I today, even when I do a project and it feels, this is actually what you wanted. And then I back off, said, no, you see yourself doing it all by yourself again. I rather quit the project until I feel the collaboration with the people, or doing a project just by myself. Being my vision can be wonderful, but if I have to do it by myself, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm looking into collaboration, into same wavelength people. I believe in that. I believe the one woman show as women is done. It's so done. And for me, it's like, not is that the right thing, but are they the right thing? Who are you working with? How does the energy feel? Are we a team? I so believe also in sisterhood. But before I want to come to that, one thing that is I'm so curious about this, because Karen, we have talked about it. You know, in our generation, when you are making a career, it was so hard after divorce to find again an equal, or to find a man on eye height level, on a conscious side. And be not just be with a man and partner, but with someone who wants to grow, who wants to be conscious. And how is it also, I heard a lot from men, you know, they don't want to have women who stand their own ground. That was still wanted in that time, a woman who's more in the back. And you still see it with spiritual leaders who are very well known. Their wives are more in the back. So I very rarely today see even they have wives who do their own careers. And I wonder, did it change in your generation or for you, that you feel there's more diversity? There are more men who love that, who love to have women who stand their ground, who start to become more conscious, who are more aware. It is a different talk compared to what you see in our generation. Has that changed?
I think it has. I think the gender roles are different now. There's more stay-at-home dads. I mean, I would consider my closest girlfriends to be incredibly strong, empowered women with their own careers and things, and married with kids. So there definitely, I think, is that. I still think that there is a element of that that's true, and I still think this gross generalizations, obviously, but I think there are definitely some men who are still intimidated by it. But I think it actually is an interesting balance, because I think, to your point that you were just making, Janine, is that it's something that I feel like I'm grappling with, and it sounds like, you know, you've grappled with, and where is our place in that? Because yes, I'm strong and I'm capable and I can do those things, but I don't want to do it on my own, you know. So both are true. It's not that I can't, it's about the choice. And I think while we're, as women, finding our place in this new emerging conversation, this new culture, this new narrative about our place and our expression and feminism, but is it needed? But of course, women are still abused, but then we've got women in power, and it's all true simultaneously. And I think it's the same for men. I've been in great relationships with people who were incredibly supportive and empowering of me, and I've met men who won't look me in the eye. So I think that, as from what
I just move because I'm going to.
Yes, of course, please do so.
This is made up, but from what I understand of the past, where the roles were clearer and more defined, I think that it's getting harder and harder to make generalizations. And I think that I know some men in my life who are the most beautifully divine, standing tall in their masculine and fully holding space for women. And I know men who are the polar opposite and are very much what I would consider in the old paradigm. So just like I'm still discovering my self-expression, I feel like that's true for a lot of people. And I think that a lot of men my age are empowered, are embracing it, love strong women, while some are confused and uncertain and don't know how to handle it and don't know how to hold it. So I definitely think it is starting to shift, but I think, you know, we're going into a whole other topic that I that I know we're not touching on today, but when you can then get into gender and gender neutral, I mean, there's so much in this area now that it's such a big topic that we're going to need to start speaking about as a society, and I think we are. But I think as much as I'm trying to find my place, I would say the same about a lot of other people.
Do you, just as a last question and closing that part also quickly, Karen, is this also in your perception? I might, I'm just having my little flash lamp on my reality, and we all know it's just a very little reality what we can see. But in our generation, I still see a lot of women who became more conscious, who started to develop later or earlier and do their things, that also when they say, my relationship doesn't match anymore, my values, or my relationship is not growing with it, I see a lot of wonderful, beautiful women by themselves. They are single, they are not, and I see it's a very soft spot for all of us. Jokingly, sometimes to my partner, I would say, if we are not making it, I come together with a woman. I just see, and it's not because I'm a lesbian. People sometimes ask, are you a lesbian? I said, no, I'm not a lesbian. It's just because I want to be in a conscious relationship that is, we have more passion together, that has a different dynamic to it, a consciousness to it. Do you see, and I was wondering if that is different in Rebecca's generation, so that might have changed already, that because men are evolving in their own tempo or just evolving quicker, that there is a different possibility happening. But I might be completely wrong here.
Well, I think when I hear Rebecca speak, and she'll often share with me what conversation she's having with either a date she's been on or friends she has, I think the levels of consciousness are different at that age. And I think that's the part of the elements that I grapple with, is that there's still the tradition. If I'm going to choose a partner or look for a partner around my age, the conditioning that is in me, that I've been at work on for over 2 decades, to break my patterns, to understand my conditioning, to move through that. I don't think men, this is again, it's a generalization, but I don't think the majority of men have taken that path. So I think therefore the challenge is to have a deep appreciation of a shared set of values. And I know I have expectations of who, or a standard that I'd want to apply to any partner that I choose. But I would rather be on my own, living consciously and doing what I love to do, which I do love what I want to do. And I think that is part of the dilemma for a lot of women I know. They're not doing what they love to do. And so therefore they seek the love from a man that's not available or not at their level. And so the compromise is on 2 levels. One is they're not doing what they love. They're not living true to their purpose. They don't know who they are themselves. And they're looking for a partner to fulfill that. And then they're saying, well, I've done all this personal development work, and here am I, where's the conscious men? But I still think it comes out of an expectation that the men are supposed to fill a void that they haven't filled themselves. So it's not a judgment, I just think it's where we are, and the men haven't taken the path, for example, that you and I have taken, rigorously, looking at our shadows, looking at our patterns and discovering who we truly are. And they don't know who they are. So a little like Rebecca, I have compassion for some, and then I get very feisty with others. Like I can't help myself getting totally triggered by Donald Trump. And I know this goes internationally, but I don't like how he speaks about women. I feel offended by how he speaks. And I know it comes out of a particular conditioning, but there's a lot of men that still hold that. And while he's setting the example and role modeling that behavior, one of the things that's increasing in Australia at the moment is the spouses and partners of women killing them. Domestic violence is on the increase, and you've got to look at why is that happening. And men are not taking on board and not being willing to take responsibility for the compromise that women have made. And I think that's such a big topic at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And for myself, I could not be in an unconscious relationship or working area, absolutely, because if you're more conscious, you reflect more, you're less reactive, you at least try to be less reactive, you're open to look at your stuff with each other, and it makes relationship building so much easier and deeper and a richer quality. That's how I think. And it also brings, and this is what I see in my generation, and I really love sisterhood and supporting women and supporting each other. I would say today my friendship circle became as important as my partnership. it is equally, it's so valuable to me. And we are such a wonderful circle of supporting each other. And also when it comes to women, of course, people say don't exclude men. That's not about excluding, but I still think that the old paradigm of that women are bitching or competing is still there. It's still in young women's minds. And I have to say that a few years I closed, just 2 or 3 years ago, I closed a project and was with women from a big company. Now I was really drained afterwards because it was very pushy, it was very competing. It just was not fun. There was no playtime. It was just very mental. And I came to board of directors from another company. And to me, that was playtime. That was just way easier. So there is still a way how women interact with each other, which is not relaxing. And this is, and of course it comes from history, and of course it has a reason, and of course there's some work to do, but I couldn't say that there's no work to do. There is still, there's an openness for us, and there's still more room for improvement on that level. Just a week ago, I saw a very young lawyer, and she's tall and beautiful, and she said, I took on a job, unfortunately, is a lot of women in there. I'd like to work more with men. So I hear this still all the time. Rebecca, what is your experience in women supporting each other, sisterhood, and expanding that part and healing that part?
My friendships are incredibly important to me. I'm very blessed to have an amazing group of friends who I really count on, who are all women, and in that circle. And I think, in a professional environment, it's quite different because I do work in a lot of very male-dominated industries. And I think, in those settings, sometimes it's like a fish doesn't know it's in water. You just can't see it. And I think the level of the patriarchal systems and societies still so strong, whether it's in business, in organizations, in corporates, in politics, in so many areas. And I've definitely seen situations where, I worked for a female boss over a decade ago, and she was without a doubt the toughest boss I've ever had. And I really struggled working for her. And then I've also worked in environments professionally where the women really have come together, called out the challenges that we're facing, and supported each other through it. So I think I have experienced both. And it's when women actually soften a little bit is when I find that becomes possible. Because if you're going into a tough environment and you're trying to match it and beat the men and play them at their own game or beat them at what they're doing, then it brings up such a different energy with which you go into those conversations and the meetings and the very jobs that you're doing. So actually, I think when we own and embrace being women for all that is, for the incredible, feisty courage, amazingness that is, but while also not having to prove anything, when we're actually a little bit more grounded in owning who we are, I think it allows a level of softness, which is where that connectivity, that inclusivity, that appreciation really builds, rather than the other energies, which is what I think has been so pervasive in the patriarchal systems that we've been living in. So in my personal life, it's fundamentally important to who I am, and my girlfriends could bring me to tears just thinking about them. They're so incredible. And in a professional environment, I've experienced both, and it's when I actually can look into another woman's eyes and check what's going on and find out about her and connect on a level of vulnerability rather than a level of competitiveness. That shift in energy for me is what's made all the difference.
And that's what I also think is, I think that's if you consciously go into a situation or into a workshop or into a group of women and you come there and bring that consciousness into the group, I literally believe it takes one person to shift a lot of energy. And you can absolutely, I don't know when I said this example, but I like it so much. It was a painful example, but such a valuable learning example. It's like 15 years ago, I did some shows, and sometimes you have this one of those days where everything's perfect. Your looks is perfect, your dress is perfect, everything is just perfect. And you just feel so happy about that. So I had one of those days, and I could see that I had a certain attraction to men who were there with their wives and girlfriends and stuff. And I was bathing in that attraction. Now, guess what? Women were not very delighted about that, of course. So I was not necessarily flirting with their husbands, but I was definitely not taking a different energy and attitude to that. I was really happy about the attraction I got, which would just pamper my ego. And after that, when I went, I felt empty. I felt somehow it felt wrong. And I was years later starting to understand, no. Next time when you come, you always come into an embracing energy. When you see husband and wives, you embrace both of them. You really come with a very different presence to the whole situation. And since then, completely has shifted in my experience. So I know how to connect with women and open up, because I really also set the stage for that. And I see how women beautifully open. And I still think this is something you do consciously, so that some pains and hurts, and it's just history. I mean, if a woman would sometimes absolutely not survive if a husband would leave her, or if another young woman would come into that. We have a history. So of course there is a competitive history that I think that is still to heal in generations. But we can heal it. The time is so, women are so ready for that. They're so, I would always say, hungry for that. What would be you are working a lot with women also, Karen. You are working with groups. You're working now with your daughter. You're going into big teams, into very big corporates, where you consciously bring in the feminine energy without losing the masculine, of course, that we both need that. What is your future vision? You also said around Christmas, I have to sit back and look again into my next steps. So what are your next steps to integrate the feminine in a more organic and natural way that flows healthy with the masculine energy?
I think it's the practices that I take on every day, because I think the practices that we have give us mastery. And if we're not practicing the softer qualities, being grateful, being appreciative, walking in nature, sitting and connecting deeply with what I love and what I fall in love with, and bringing light to that. I think I've also set myself up in terms of my business name, the Flourish Initiative. Many people say to me it's a very feminine name. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to have structures around us that remind us, because when we've got very well established patterns, which I have, we can easily fall back into the patterns. And I've watched often, I'm being very mindful at the moment of the training I do outside of the corporate environment, because the program I lead, Grace and Resilience, which you know of, Janine, mm-hmm. is what I've watched is that it disrupts people, it empowers women, and it empowers them to bring this vulnerability and this compassion and a different level of femininity. And then they go back into a system that annihilates that, that actually takes them down, wants to subvert them, wants to marginalize them, and they then have to leave the system. Now, for some people that's fine, but what I'm passionate about now is going into the system with my own heart. And quite honestly, a project I was working on last year, I found that I went in with such strong resistance to a group of leaders, I nearly got thrown out of the project because I knew I was judging them. And it was amazing what I did. This sounds very bizarre, but it worked. I actually went home and I was ashamed of what I'd taken in there. And I knew the judgment I had about them. And so I actually started praying, really just sending blessings, because I do believe in energy transfer. So I think we do have to bring in our grace. We have to bow our heads to the environments we go into and pray for the healing, or bring blessing, or whatever your version is. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe prayer is an intent of energy, of love that goes and gets transmitted to someone else. And I do think it's going to be more and more important. We are going into a collapse. We just have to look at the coronavirus at the moment and what it's doing to take people in and isolate them as if we weren't feeling isolated enough.
Yes.
We've got a construct that's actually taking us into that. I think we're going to have a lot more that we're contending with. We're going to need, to Rebecca's point, our vulnerability and our strength. And I think those dynamics, we're going to have to grow much more resilient, much more grace and forgiveness to ourselves, and prayer and love Mother Earth. I think all of this, everything we've got in our resource bank now is going to be required for what we need to bring. But mostly, we've annihilated the feminine in the world, Mother Nature. compromised it in ourselves. And I think more than ever before, I'm passionate that we have to restore the feminine.
That is so, so wonderful and so valuable what you're saying. Also about judgment. And we just have a lesson in, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, and this week's lesson is judgment. And everybody would have a list how we see the world just for a few days. And it's just completely full out of judgments. Everybody would be shocked. And with my partner, I would say for one vacation, oh, just jokingly, let's have 3 days without judgment. And if the other would say judgment, the other would say judgment. So literally, we felt we have almost nothing to say anymore because we always would go into judgments, anything judgments. And I remember that I also was with the leadership team, and I was thrown out. And that was one of those painful lessons. Some of them are so valuable because you really grow, and you grow through all the ego hurts and all that stuff. And but I also got, and it's such a good closure to what you just said, Karen. I went there and I was very judgmental when I thought, this is all what I get after all your hurt. And after all you said, you are not walking your talk. And all the stories of people who say that and are not walking their talk came up in that moment. So my aggression was really high. Now, aggression is also not really attractive and nice and pushy. But as a woman, I think in particular, it's not very nice. So I reacted way more aggressive than it was my role, because I was disappointed and all the stories were up there. So next time when we were asked to do work again, they decided to do it with my partner alone. And that was hurtful. So I had to think again about my story. What did I do? And then you go through all the emotions. But then we had another circle a year later where I would meet them again with the whole team. And in my mind, while I was praying and working on them, it was transforming. So there was a point in my mind and in my heart where I honestly was seeing myself hugging one of the directors and was completely in peace. So I had absolutely no agenda when I came to this huge workshop where they were part of it, neither fear nor judgment. There was just a white piece of paper. So literally after that workshop ended, this director came to me and hugged me and said, this was so joyful with you. And we all came back together, and that was complete healing and wonderful. But it didn't come by, I would just put a layer on affirmation on the top of it. It was, I worked literally for 1.5 years through the pain until it was so dissolved that that was shifting in energy. And I think that's what I always want to point out to people. Healing is not easy at times. Healing does take commitment, and sometimes the layers are like, oh wow, there it is again. And I thought it was already done. So in this time where we feel like squeezed and are so focused on healing because the world is just so intense right now, what is your wish for, for you, Rebecca, for the world, where you say you're really wanting to contribute to a positive future? What is your wish?
My wish is that we collectively get back in touch with our interconnectedness. Because I feel that if we were truly in touch with that, a lot of the atrocities that we see in the world today wouldn't be possible. That's to each other, and that's also to Mother Nature, because I think if we really felt the pain of what's happening to the oceans, the animals, in the climate, the rainforests, if we actually let ourselves feel that pain, there is no way that we would be able to carry on what we're doing. And also being willing to be with the pain, because I think even briefly mentioning to Simon Sinek as well, he talked about that, is actually how the level of impatience and intolerance of the discomfort. So it's the quick fix, it's the instant gratification, but actually sometimes you have to go through the shadow to find the light. And I think being willing to be with the discomfort and actually feel the pain and the suffering that's happening, so that we actually bring our compassion for each other and our world. For me, I think that would be the start of a shift to create a new conversation and a new future.
Do you guys think that people who are not aware or not started an aware journey so far, if they hardly feel their own pain, can they feel pain of Mother Nature?
No, I would say.
I think in their system, I honestly believe everybody can feel it, but I think we ignore it. That's the thing, what I think we do, because I think in many instances, the willful blindness, because if I let myself really acknowledge what I feel, then I would, one, most people I think would be ashamed. Two, they need to know, then they would have to wake up and change what they're doing, and they're not really prepared to, because it will represent discomfort. I don't want to let go of my designer handbag. I don't want to have to stop flying. All of those things I think are in the mix. So I think people do feel it. I think people ignore it. And a lot of, I have clients that I'm coaching, and because I work energetically, I say to them, could I offer you something that I'm feeling right now? Because I do work energetically. And you can check it out. Is this true? Are you feeling ashamed? Are you feeling fearful? And I said this to a group of clients recently when we were talking about fear in their culture. And I said, where do you feel the fear? And I think that's important, that we can recognize our own feelings. And I do think people are feeling it. So I think mostly people are ignoring it. And they shut down and numbing it. And they go on to the next purchase, the next dinner, or the next shopping expedition or something.
You're coming from Australia, and closing, because I know you guys have to go and I've kept you already way too long. But it's so interesting. I think I could just talk another hour, but don't be afraid. I will not. But coming from Australia, and where the fire was so heart-touching, and also rescuing the animals who are crying when they are burned, and it is so heart-touching. There went one video went viral, and I showed it for my birthday because we would collect money. What always absolutely touches me, if you have a natural catastrophe or something happens in nature, it feels like in this instant, everybody is helpful. Everybody is supportive. There seems to be no ego. Everybody is just there to help, and everybody just feels. There's this right away oneness of connection. And there's this right away purpose of, we are all here to help each other. And that still functions. So if something bad happens, there's this instinct, or this, you can see this soul seed that is still all in us, because we immediately, no matter how unaware somebody is, but immediately we're helping each other to survive. And there's immediately an amazing force. And I always explain this when it comes to purpose. There's a purpose of oneness when there is something bad happening, flooding happening, storms happening, and people are in danger, animals are in danger. And that always makes me emotional, because I see how awesome would that be if we could go and grow into that energy that is a natural energy that is always in us, and that will never be, I don't think that will ever give up. But of course, we are so cluttered with what's happening outside that we forget about that. So I hope, ending this, I don't hope that we are going to need catastrophes happening so that we find each other again. Thank you so much for your beautiful, wonderful work. Thank you for being such an inspirational leadership team for each other and for us. I love that. I really do love that. And I really wish you success in what you're doing. I think not just in the business world. I really hope that one day you might also be inspired to work at schools, to work with parents, to work with mothers, how to, not just educate young women, but also men, also really men, because if men are educated in a mindful, kind way, gosh, it's just awesome. It's just really awesome. So having said this, thank you so much, Rebecca Day. I have to say that name again, Rebecca Day, the next perfume on the market. Thank you so much, Karen, Karen Lee Downs. Thank you so much to Michael Maria Kraus for post-production. And wherever you are, dear audience, have a soulful, wonderful, peaceful rest of your day. Hopefully see you soon again. Bye-bye.